So welcome to the third of these walks. And the first one we started with Martin Herrera giving a blessing to the land. And we don't have Martin here, but I do want to...
That's
what?
poison oak.
That's poison oak. I want to acknowledge that we are meeting on the traditional territories of a combination of Costanoan, Esselen, and Salinan peoples, and respect their ongoing stewardship of the land by the indigenous inhabitants. And even though we don't have Martin or another tribal member here to start us out, I want to take a moment of silence to sort of focus our intentions for the day. But before we do that, let's just go around, and if you don't mind saying your name and maybe what group you might be part of. If you are, you don't have to say that, or even where you're from in the region if you want to. You could just say your name and leave it at that. But let's just start with that. I'm Lori, and I'm starting, part of the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA Ecosocialists group, and it's that group that is sort of helping co-organize these series of walks. And I live in Santa Cruz.
I'm Michael. I also live in Santa Cruz. I'm also in the DSA Ecosocialist group, and I do some Science for the People, which is interested in such things as well.
I'm Christy Toronto. I'm from Salinas, and I'm part of SAS, Safe Bags, Safe Schools, and we advocate on behalf of children and farm workers for a safe perimeter around schools and fields.
Well, she's also a member of Measure Z.
Measure Z, I worked very hard with these two people here, and we won.
Yay!
Just leave that there.
I'm Vivian. I also live in Santa Cruz, and I'm not a grad student at UC. I'm Debbie. I also live in Santa Cruz.
I'm Karen. I'm a new resident.
I'm Jen. I'm a resident marina in a variety of different clubs that includes California Native Plant Society, and I'm a volunteer elected with the Marina Coast Water Disuse Board.
Yay!
I'm Sam. I live in LA. I'm visiting.
I'm Martabelle. I'm in DSA. I live in Santa Cruz.
I'm Megan. I live in Santa Cruz.
I'm Mary. I live in Aromas, and I was active in Measure Z.
Andy Shaw Coron. I live in Aromas. We were involved in Measure J and Z, the initiatives that ban fracking and a lot of oil extraction. And now we're trying to stop major commercial development along Highway 101 in San Benito County.
Mark Newman from Aromas.
I'm Eric. I'm from Santa Cruz, and I'm retired. I haven't got much to do, so I'm joining my friend Mark here.
Hi, I'm Miriam. I'm from Santa Cruz.
I'm Dred. I'm from Salinas, photographer, all around nosy person.
That works well. I'm Wes from Salinas. I do a YouTube channel, anything helpful and positive, civic, social, environmental justice oriented. So SAS and Measure Z and Salinas Valley Water Protectors, DSA, and Burner. So
Thanks
Dred's
so much.
also part of the Veterans Transition and Learning Center.
So thanks, Wes, for coming out to document. And again, if anybody doesn't want to have their image documented by photo or video, please let both of us know, because I'll probably be taking pictures, and other people are welcome to take photographs or document in other ways. I just want to, before we have a moment of silence, I just want to say that, that's getting a little ahead of things. So let's just think a little bit about why we're here. And I want to say that that could be, just individually your own goals for the next couple of hours, what you want to have happen, what you hope to learn, what you hope to contribute or think about. And the larger goals of making connections between the land, the water, the living and non-living inhabitants and components of these places that we are inhabiting and passing through, and that sustain us, and our collective and evolving understanding of what's common and uncommon, what we want and need to share, and what we don't want to be and can't be privatized. So if we just think for a moment about that together, to kind of set our intentions. A moment of silence is just all the sounds that enter in. And of course we're standing in a parking lot, which is I think a really interesting aspect of thinking about land use and how this particular place has been sort of transformed over time from indigenous lands gradually into a military base, and part of it now into a sort of public park with trails and all of that, but still quite complicated in its use of the land. So what I want to do before we get really started is to basically give an overview for people who are new, and it will be very brief, and a little sense of what has happened so far with the two walks, and then what I imagine for the day. And as always so far with these walks, this is an opportunity for all of you to contribute your thoughts and understanding and knowledges, and not necessarily for just experts to talk, but this is like an evolving understanding between all of us. So the larger goal of these walks, which I think if you've read the sort of introductory stuff, is to really think about what's common, what can't be taken, those aspects of the world that are shared and can't be privatized, should not be privatized, but which are being stolen and trespassed on by private interests. And that we take as a given that what's common can't be known for all. It's not the same. So sometimes we talk about the uncommon as what we realize that we have different ideas of what's common, but all of those ideas together could be called the sort of common uncommons. Then that's to take into consideration perspectives and experiences that we don't all share, but that could be talked about and brought into a coalition. And by bringing this into relation to the Salinas River, it's metaphorically drawing a connection across boundaries between ecosystems and communities and different struggles happening throughout the valley. So a future goal of these walks is to organize a tribunal in the probably now winter-spring area that would bring together testimonies of people who are affected by these trespasses onto the common uncommons by private properties. So part of what's happening as we gather over these next couple of months too would be to gather evidence and testimony of those kinds of trespasses. And it's important for me anyway to keep that sort of future goal in mind too, so that these walks can be somewhat cumulative. And it's also just to meet each other and find out what's happening across these different regions as we build our understanding. So the first one, the Moss Landing walk at the former mouth, the old mouth of the Salinas River, we really sort of focused on these three areas of water, energy, and food, which I think are continuing to be the three main environmental justice foci of these walks. So in that case, we had a water conservation person who talked about their work in Moss Landing with water quality. We had somebody, Mary and Andy, speaking about the oil industry incursions on the valley further down into Monterey County. And we also were overshadowed by the Moss Landing power plant and all the implications of that. And we also had people from SAS speaking about their work in hospitals in Salinas and the injured, children who came into the hospitals as evidence of some of the pesticide use that's being used in the fields. And so it was a very complex mix of some of the issues that the Salinas River Valley bring together. And the second, and that was a very beautiful walk. The second walk in King City was kind of less beautiful. The river is more compromised there. It was hard to even find, even though we were at a public park that bordered the river. But it brought up a lot of questions and interest in, why is the river being neglected at that point? Why is this public park not even celebrating this thing that's flowing between us? And so that also raised a lot of really interesting questions and discussions. Mary Sella, who's going to join us later, spoke a lot about further events that were happening with the new oil well permits being opened in the Hames Valley, further down the river. And there were also other contributions from people on that walk. So today we're starting at Fort Ord, partly because we'll be able to look at the river, which is just over there, as probably all of you know, and because this is a kind of public place to start. It also raises so much about the military engagement with land use, and I know many of you probably know more about Fort Ord than I do from reading stuff online and relatively new to the area. So I thought that we could walk a little bit up to the hill, look out over the valley, and maybe anybody who wants to contribute what you know about this area would be great to hear from. And I can contribute whatever I know from a little bit of research. And then from here, it'll be just a short walk. I thought we would drive via Old Davis Road, where there's a really interesting solar panel installation that we'll pass, which I think is a part of the DeRigo brothers trying to integrate solar power into their agriculture industry. And then just past that on the way to Spreckles, and we'll meet at Spreckles Memorial Park, the former company town of Spreckles Sugar. And then we'll talk a little bit there, and then we'll travel via River Road to Gonzales and meet with Juan Martinez in Gonzales, who will speak to us about his work and thoughts and ideas about the Salinas River there at the Gonzales Slough, which is right downtown. Does that sound like a plan? All right, so let's walk.
Can I say,
please, yeah.
Just for a second.
Please, Andy.
For those who are not really accustomed to walking around here, let me introduce my friend here, Poison Oak. And a lot of people have this horrible hostility to this lovely creature here. What a lot of folks don't know is that everywhere where Native Americans lived, where there was either poison ivy or poison oak, they ate poison ivy and poison oak. And it turns out that the small amounts of it turns out that it's kind of a complex immune response to it. But in eating small amounts of it, and there's actually medicines called oral ivy and immune oak that used to exist, you can actually desensitize yourself to it. I used to get it so bad, my eyes would swell shut and I'd have to have shots to take it down. And for many years now, 30 years, I've actually been eating it, and I go out and collect mushrooms and don't get it anymore. But it is as much an important organism in this area as the oak trees in terms of many, many birds and insects feed on the berries, work with the flowers. And there's a bird called a towhee that literally its whole life is entwined with this. It feeds on the berries, it nests in the plant, and it helps spread poison oak everywhere, you know. But if you're not desensitized, you should pay some attention to not walking through it. But I think people should have a more complex point of view about this native plant.
That's great. And Jan, we're so glad that you joined. I'm so glad you joined us because you have sort of specialized knowledge into some of these plants and ecosystems. You probably know, or somebody knows better than I, but there are 3 endangered species in Fort Ord National Monument Park. And just if you keep an eye out, one is a spotted salamander that looks like this. Another is I don't know if it's the season for any of these, and these are internet pictures. Goldfield's yellow flower here that looks like this. Bad image, but look out for yellow flowers. And another is a blue butterfly. So you might find any of these, maybe not though seasonally, but I just want you to realize.
Most likely the butterfly.
Maybe most likely the butterfly. But we were talking in the drive up here about how interesting it is that military reserves, because they're set aside because usually they're so polluted by various reasons, like unexploded ordnance and stuff, they don't want people going here, that certain species are able to thrive that aren't able to thrive elsewhere, which is a really interesting paradox. The other thing I want to say is if anybody, as always on these walks, would like to look really closely at the world, I have 7 of these 10x lenses you can borrow, and just if you haven't used them, you have to put your eye up, usually without glasses, really, really close, and then it's amazing how the world opens up. So if anybody would like to borrow a lens as we walk slowly, you're nodding, okay. I thought we could pause here because we got a pretty good view of the valley. Obviously the hedgerow is where the main hedgerow over there is the river. And I don't know, does anyone have any, I could give you my brief, outline of Fort Ord and a few sentences, but does anyone have any particular knowledge or relation to Fort Ord that you might want to offer to the group? Who knows about this area? Or should I just start and you can throw in?
I was going to make an observation about what we're looking at.
Yeah, that's fabulous. Okay.
There is a leaked report from the IPCC, basically the United Nations Climate Change Group. They're going to come out with a report later, but someone leaked it to say that they are going to be telling us all that the agricultural system that we have, especially in Salinas Valley, is really unsustainable and really a problem for climate change, and we have to actually change our agriculture system because where you see all the plowed soil, that's really bad because the soil itself can sequester huge amounts of carbon. And the way to do it, in fact, there's a farmer we know in San Benito County. We live right north of here in San Benito. His name is Phil Foster, who's experimenting with very little tilling. So he's actually growing cover crops and then he slices, pushes them down and then slices through and then drops seeds so you don't till the soil. And as a consequence, by doing that, the soil carbon builds up. And so a lot of scientists tell us that agriculture could be a great solution. If we could sequester a lot of the carbon in the soil, it could really help us, tackle. It's not just a matter of getting off of fossil fuels. We need other solutions like sequestering carbon. And so it just struck me as I see this whole valley, which is very unsustainable. It's really basically fossil fuel farming because the fertilizer and the pesticides are created using fossil fuels. And of course, the heavy equipment you see is powered by fossil fuels. So our food comes from really a very fossil fuel oriented sort of farming method. That's how they say.
Yeah. Some people argue that because farming's going to go all robotics and people are going to leave the fields, that it shouldn't concern us. That
Well, I mean, it's true, but then the robots need energy, so unless you have solar power, wind power, it's robots.
Yeah.
But that's still a really factory farm model, and I think what people are looking at is more permaculture, where, I mean, I guess you could still figure out. I actually don't know if you have to eliminate people so much. I mean, I think that's a model that's based on the kind of somewhat. I mean, I think it's really based on a model of farming that's very capitalistic. You know, I mean, you're basically extracting as much as possible, and I think the reason they're eliminating labor is because of the cost.
Yeah.
The only reason.
And also because labor needs breaks, vacation time to go to sleep. Whereas if you have robots, you could have them working ungodly hours.
In places to live.
Unabashed slaves.
Places to live. So it's a model of really eliminating people, and I don't know.
it's another way for agriculture. They take 80% of our water, and it's another way for them to skirt their responsibility. I mean, especially. I hear that because I bring up pesticides.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh, we don't have to worry about because it's all going mechanized."
Because the robots won't care about pesticides.
Right.
Well, the thing though is it's not sustainable. I mean, we are already hearing from scientists that we need to change. Even if you have robots, you still have to change the way we farm. You can't just do what we do, which is till the soil, use pesticides, which destroys so many. I mean, one of the other problems is the insects population is like an Armageddon. Or I think I read that insect populations declined 50 to 70%.
Wow.
So even without, I think the concerns about pesticides and harm to people is important, but it's also harming the fabric of the ecosystem. The insects are considered the kind of the glue for a lot of ecosystems, and I mean we're on a really dangerous trajectory, and I think that's the problem.
I agree.
That is the vision that of a lot of
That's what I've been hearing lately.
That everything's going to be robots,
right.
But I don't know if that's really a sustainable future. Oh, we have someone else who wants to
Well,
say.
just quickly, there is another vision. Agroecology is what it's usually called, but there are lots of scientists, peasant farmers, and around the world that are involved in a movement to fight this. And it's about fighting industrial, capitalist, big ag kind of farming, monoculture. And so there is another side that's fighting it. Yeah.
But we have to, I think what the scientists are saying is we have to accelerate that so much more, because if you look at this valley, most of it is the agribusiness, monoculture, and it's destroying our planet.
It's interesting that you all brought up those two aspects. Just as I would note that the two big agribusiness companies in Spreckles, Tinamura and Antle, is known for heading towards robotics. It's like its main drive right now. And the Rigo Brothers is heading towards solar power as a greater support for its agriculture. So they're sort of in oppositional directions, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Jan, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, a little bit on the history and sort of prehistory. So Salinas River used to drain Lake Corcoran, which is an ancient lake in the valley, what made the valley, and it shifted when all the water shifted out the San Francisco Bay mouth. But this is a really ancient river valley, super prehistoric, and it runs in a way that's not exactly layered like many people think of as a parfait with aquifers and aquatards, those clay layers that keep the water separate like a parfait. The hydrologists like to say it's more like a three-dimensional parfait, and the pieces, what I like to think of as really old-fashioned, so maybe some of the youngsters won't know, but there's a kind of jello that people make that they cube the jello, and then they mix it with white like cream, what do you call that? The
Cool Whip.
Cool Whip, thank you. I haven't thought of that for about 30 years. Cool Whip. So yeah, you get this beautiful multicolored blocks of firm jello mixed with the cream, and that's how I think of the Salinas Valley Delta area as you go downstream. And so the people upstream to the south, right, San Ardo area, they do have the traditional barriers, but we don't know exactly where it starts to break down and become more three-dimensionally deltaized. So,
and meanwhile, they're doing wastewater injection from the oil industry into that unknown thing and claiming that these layers somehow are going to protect us from ever seeing those contaminated waters again.
Yeah, and then surrounding us here in the former Fort Ord, we have a lot of plants that were tended by the original people that were here, the indigenous people. But we're also, I like this bunch grass right next to Christie there. But we're also in the Artemisia behind you. Have you smelled the sagebrush before? It has a really nice aromatic smell. The coyote bush behind the sagebrush also is native. But I'm seeing a lot of this kind of mustard, which is not native, and this kind of oak grass, which is not native. But the oak grass is kind of cool because the colonizers who spoke Spanish used this to make hats and sandals. So it's a useful plant, right? And useful plant that escaped into the wilds. So I was hoping I would see some soaproot here. It looks a little bit like the mustard, with the one main stem and these kind of long branching here. The soaproot is always a sign that there was a colony of Native American people because it was so useful and a good food backup. Also then, there were people here that were part of the Spanish-speaking military, and there's a great book called Testimonios, the stories that Bancroft collected that were the women's voice. And one of them is about Agustia de Ord. Her husband was the surgeon on the base, and so she represents to me kind of the transition between the Spanish-speaking and the English-speaking, because the surgeon Ord was a pretty good guy, James Ord, her husband, Jaime. And then he had a brother, Edward Ord, that the base is actually named after. Edward was involved in what they call nowadays Indian campaigns.
Ooh.
I think they called them that for a long time, but you know, that's kind of a euphemism, right? Yeah. That's where they would just go out and destroy people for money. So, yeah, I don't really care for Edward Ord myself, but his brother was cool and his sister-in-law. And she even tried one time hiding somebody that the U.S. soldiers were looking for. So that kind of thing has been going on here a really long time, right? 1 million different people were deployed through Fort Ord. So my personal connection is my dad and my stepdad both. One to Korea, one to Germany. Yours too.
My dad.
Yeah, so a lot of people went to war-torn areas, and this was one of the first 3 facilities to be desegregated. So that hits home too, desegregated. So they were actually segregating the soldiers for a long time, right? And then they desegregated it, and that allowed some of the soldiers to bring home families from these war-torn areas. So when I look around my hometown now, I see people from the Philippines, from Vietnam, from Korea, from Germany, from the Marshall Islands, you know, where they did a lot of testing out in Kwajalein and whatnot. American Samoa. We have families from all over the place. Multi-generational now, but that's kind of the history of Marina and Seaside, is that the soldiers were able to bring people out of war-torn areas that the military was destroying around the world. The U.S. military, sometimes military backed by U.S. funds, they were not U.S. So it's a place, I think, where people are trying to come and be healthy and be peaceful. And so I love this area of Monterey Bay for that. Even though I have, you know, strong feelings about some of the history, we're hopefully going to keep moving in the direction of, like we said earlier, food security, water security, and everything being sustainable with people who just want to live in a peaceful place, keep it clean and healthy for the next generation. But yeah, so I hope I didn't burden you too much with some of the sad stories, but you know,
but also, isn't there, you know, about the Uniparocera? I mean, the basic, you know, long-term, long ago dialogue with the Native Americans around here has been kind of confusing because he was sainted by the Catholic Church, and it's come out that wasn't all. And I guess UCSC just took down some of the memorial to him, but there's a lot of Native Americans here that still remember and bring that out in history.
One other thing about the river itself, when you look at it, you see that little band there. Jan talked about how there's an ancient lake here, but even in modern human history, that river was once much more impressive thing. What you see is the surface expression of the water table. In other words, no matter how, when the water table is higher, you see more of the river flowing. But it's this vast underground river that flows from San Luis Obispo County all the way out to the ocean. And it used to have so much water, probably before they had all these wells pumping the water level down, that it had a Chinook salmon run, that people used to take ferries across the river.
Oh, wow.
To cross. So we've dramatically modified this, this river valley, and still it supports all these farms and all these cities, and still ends up, emptying into Monterey Bay. So it's still pivotal to the area, but it has, of course, the potential for being restored more and keeping more flow. It has a steelhead run that still goes up here and into the Arroyo Seco, and it's got other native fish as well as introduced fish. And at San Ardo, we saw a beaver dam. Beavers have returned to the river. So it's, it's something that would be wonderful if we fought the battle the way they did around the Hudson River on the East Coast, that helped launch the modern environmental movement to make it both more accessible and to make it a healthier river.
Yeah, there was so much water that right over there, I was looking at an old map that used to be a ferry landing site. So in other words, people used to take a ferry boat all the way up here, and right over there was, right on this side of 68, there was a lot more water, in other words.
Thank you, everybody. I think at this point, in order to sort of stay on track, this is really wonderful to hear all this news. And Jen, the histories you present are so much more interesting than what Wikipedia has to offer about Fort Ord. So I'm not going to even go where, whatever I found on my short research. But let's head back to the parking lot now, and we'll reconvene for the next stop. But what I would recommend is going left or sort of northwest on Reservation Road, and then taking a right on, I wrote it down.
Davis?
On Blanco.
Oh, Blanco.
Further, go up to Blanco.
Yeah, Davis to Blanco.
And what we'll find, I'm sorry, to Davis, Davis.
Well, Davis if you're going to Blanco.
Take a right on Davis, and South Davis Road will cross the Salinas River, and it's a pretty busy road, but if you can pull over if you want, just after you cross the river to the right, there's a dusty place we could park, and you'll see the solar panels on the other side of the road, just over the river. You don't have to stop there if you don't want. You can keep going on to Spreckles, and I'll tell you a route to get there. But I think it's really interesting to see this. It's a relatively small solar panel installation, and it's kind of anomalous in the midst of all of this big ag, and I think it's kind of interesting to see. So I don't, again, know very much about Spreckles other than the little bit of research I do online, but I'd love it if other people know. The really obvious part to probably everyone is that the Spreckles Sugar Beet Company was built this town. Klaus Spreckles, who was originally a German man who came apparently to the U.S. with like one what kind of German currency was it then? One mark in his pocket, It's like an immigrant story. And moved from North Carolina, I think, to San Francisco, and then gradually built his sugar industry. And now in 87, so Spreckles sugar beets went for 100 years almost, from the late 1800s to 87. And now the two main industries are the DeRigo brothers and the Tinamora and Antle that you can see on outside of town. We were just mentioning in the last stop. So it was a company town, so everyone, was living in company buildings, for most of the time, as I understand it.
The Tinamora family were interns.
Can you talk about that?
We happened to have been at a ceremony at the Monterey County Supervisors where they were there. They brought a lot of folks honoring them. Luis Alejo, one of our more opportunistic politicians in this region, took advantage of highlighting and honoring the.
He was an apologist.
Yeah, an apology by Monterey County, but it's kind of an interesting guy because he aligns himself with the ag industry and with many, many industries, and then he does some things that are socially liberal, and was, that was kind of his MO. And but it was a pretty moving ceremony with a lot of the old families who had been interned, and even Sandy Lyden was there, the historian, speaking about it. So it was a pretty interesting event.
So the Tinamora family were Japanese?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And they actually was very interesting. I talked to Mr. Tinamora. I think he was the son of the founder. He actually explained that when his family started farming, they farmed the land that was not as desirable. So where I live, Aromas, his family started there. And then as their family, they had a big family, a lot of children, so everyone worked. And then they started going into the better areas, which is the Salinas Valley. And then I think they were very fortunate in that eventually his father and Antle created a partnership. And that was, he's Anglo.
And they protected because a lot of people lost their resources
land
during the internment.
So there are a lot of families who, when they came back, the land had been, where they were forced to sell it for almost nothing, or sometimes people just lost it because whoever took care of their land didn't give it back to them. But anyway, the Tinamoras did very well, so they're part of the big agribusiness here. And this is part of their company town. They have a headquarters. We actually went there for the Dream Measure Z. Juan said, let's go over there and talk to them. So we went there. No one wanted to talk to us, but we got to see their headquarters. They've got a really beautiful headquarters over here. And they kind of have this as kind of their company town. They were building dormitories, I believe, and places for their farm workers to live, I believe.
They're getting more organic too, a little bit, aren't they, Tanner?
I think all of them are. Even Taylor Farms, which is super against Measure Z. I think it's because it's a more profitable area. But the interesting thing about the organic movement with the large agribusiness moving in, they basically diluting the standards. So CCOF, which is starting in Santa Cruz, we were talking to them. They will not ban use of wastewater for organic.
Petroleum wastewater.
Because they didn't say this, but it's because powerful, big ag like Taylor Farm and Tinamora Antle have organic, and they pay dues. The way CCOF is supported is by the people who get certified, and so they're now favoring big ag more. And so the small farmers who are big ag or organic are having more difficulty because the big ag is making the price of organic drop. And so I heard from Sally Calhoun that a lot of small organic farmers are really struggling right now. So we probably need to move to a new standard that is more permaculture and sustainable, because a lot of the organic, like Earthbound Farm, Tinamora, Antle, they may not use pesticides and fertilizer, but still the farming techniques are very extractive. They till the soil and allow erosion to happen.
A lot of contamination of the groundwater because they're using fertilizers that are more soluble and sink into the groundwater.
That are considered organic?
Yes.
Well, I think what's happening is they're able to influence the standards now. And like the fact that they're allowing wastewater from oil fields and label that organic still is really shocking. So it was interesting because we had a chance to talk to some people from the the Santa Cruz CCOF, and they're not very receptive, I think, to changes. CCOF is very profitable. I asked them how many people work for CCOF. They said 100 people. So it's become pretty big business, and it's about money. So even the organic, Andy and I lived in Santa Cruz, and we saw the organic industry grow because it started with Alan Chadwick's garden and near Merrill College, and Andy and I used to volunteer there, or used to hang out there. That was 40 years ago. So we saw how the organic movement has become big industry. But the thing is, money has corrupted it again, even CCOF.
Question? Were any of these Japanese families, were they here during the Second World War, and were any of their farming operations interrupted?
Oh yeah, the tours definitely
Was any
were.
properties confiscated?
Well, they, as I said, they had this partnership with the Antilles, who were not, who were European, and they were able to protect those. But many, if you read Sandy Leiden's book about the Japanese Americans of the Monterey Bay area, along with his book Chinese Gold, which are both great books, the Japanese American situation was really interesting because different cities in the region had very different experiences. Watsonville was so hostile to the Japanese Americans that leaders of the community wrote to the federal government at the end of the war saying don't let them come back. And then much of the land had been taken, whereas Monterey actually had a parade welcoming people back. So different communities had very different experiences.
But I think the internment really set back a lot of families financially. So a lot of them lost. Some of them even sold their lands, in desperation right before the internment. So they didn't get very much. And I remember I worked in Silicon Valley for a while, and one of my coworkers' family had owned land in Silicon Valley, and she said that their family was forced to sell, for practically nothing, and today it would have been millions of dollars.
Right.
So yeah, there was a period when a lot of wealth was transferred away from the Japanese Americans.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering if anyone, well, maybe you all didn't come in the same route that my friend Mark and I took, but there was a sprinkler out in the field that was larger than a fire hose coming out. Did you happen to see that? It seems like an excessive amount of water that they use. I don't understand why these crops would demand that much water, but maybe they do.
Well, the vegetable, given that this is a no rainfall area, a lot of these vegetables are pretty water crops. Kind of, and it's supplying virtually the whole nation's fresh vegetables.
Exactly, we were talking about that. Yeah.
But as you mentioned, I think farms use 80% of California's water, which is, and I think it's only what percent?
It was less than 3% of the economic activity of California.
But uses 80% of our water, so there's a little bit of imbalance there.
Right.
Still to this day.
Yes.
That's what Andy's read. So it's still very low. So I think there are even conservative decision makers who are saying this picture doesn't look right. The fact that they're contributing so little to our economy. It's a huge percent in this county, but the rest of the state, we have a lot of industries like Silicon Valley that provide more of an
entertainment, all sorts of things.
So what is it that makes California the 5th largest economy in the world? I thought agriculture had a big part of that.
Turns out that it's, as I said, only a bit player in the economy of the state.
The overall economy.
Probably Silicon Valley, entertainment, tourism,
So by company town, did that mean that the company created the housing and the people who lived there worked in the company, but was the housing provided to them for free?
Oh, I don't know if it was free.
Right, you probably had to pay rent.
They probably had to pay something, but yeah, they did provide housing. The Spreckles companies. So,
So in all the houses, like when we first drove in, all of those housing, it's different than this housing.
Yeah, this is kind of new. I think some of these are renovated. Some of the houses are older. This is Speckles is fixed up quite a bit. Yeah, there are a few like this one looks a little older.
Yeah.
It said somewhere in my internet research that Tina Mora and Antle also provided housing for the workers.
They do. They've built these kind of like big dorm-like places that's somewhere, not here, that are for, like single males.
Oh, not here.
No, it is in Speckles. It is somewhere in Speckles.
H2A, yeah, they have workforce housing on TNA property.
But where is it at? Is it
I think it's right across the street of the street back here.
It's the one with the big complex.
Where you saw the silos, the sugar beet silos?
Yeah, there's some really big buildings that look like big dorm type.
Yep, and it's got a cafe, so they don't have to leave, and you get to extract the money back from your employees.
Yes.
Right.
Do you know about the housing?
No.
Oh, okay.
Once it's Salinas, I know they have.
They've taken over most of the hotels, yeah.
Oh, really?
Right.
I would imagine that the company would own the stores and that you would use company currency to pay in the grocery stores around town. Am I wrong about that, I wonder?
So you're always in debt.
Yes, always struggling.
We don't know if that was the case in this particular company town, but I always the movie Made One by John Sayles, I think it gives you a sense of what company towns are like and how much people are essentially connected and beholden to the company, that essentially they become like serfs.
I mean, I think that was a model that was pretty prevalent. Like even where I live, Aromas was a company town. It was Granite Rock's company town, and but in some ways even though it's very paternalistic, there was at least housing. I think we have moved to a new model of capitalism where a lot of workers are homeless even, living out of their cars. So I think in some ways there was this feeling of a bit of a responsibility to workers, even though it was rather extractive still. At least we didn't have homeless people who are workers.
Thank you for all your incredibly deep knowledge. And the next stop is to go to Gonzales. And I think the best route is to just get back onto 68 and then cross over to River Road. And the reason why River Road is so amazing is that the drive along there really follows the river. And there's several points in which you get really close, but of course you can't actually see it because of all of the overgrowth. But it's a really interesting drive, thinking about land use and property and who owns the land as you go along, like vineyards, but also agriculture, but also these new estates based on the ranchos that are the ranches that used to be there. So, and there's also a water reclamation facility, Las Palmas Water Reclamation Facility, that I've requested that we could all visit, and that's a possible future visit for those of you who might be interested to talk more about. So then it's very easy to get to Gonzales, then you turn left on Gonzales River Road off of River Road, and we're meeting on Elko Street between 4th and 5th in Gonzales. So there's a parking lot. It's right on the Gonzales Slough, which is not the actual Salinas River, but it's this sort of rough piece of land in the middle of the city. And we're going to go pick up Juan at his house just a few blocks away and bring him to meet you at the Gonzales Slough.
Say one more thing about both Speckles and actually the place we were at before. We forgot to mention, for the Measure Z battle, in terms of controlling the oil industry in this county, where we were before and this town are both really significant in that before we even had a name, a ballot measure, Bernie Sanders came to Speckles and did a press conference in support of our efforts to ban fracking. That I had to go through the process of getting everybody's security clearance.
It was right over there. I have a picture of it here.
But just right here, You can actually still find the picture from Bernie Sanders and Spreckles. And it really shook up the supervisors to have Senator Bernie Sanders raising issues about the oil industry here in Monterey County. And that once we had collected the signatures to force the initiative on the ballot, we had our press conference at the site we were before, that where we gathered all the people who've been involved in the process and kind of highlighted the river behind us.
I think you might have seen it.
Is that him?
You know, I had a question about the Fort Ord and
people from our
fracking
campaign. It was right over there
read
with
in the Measure Z detailed settlement of the county that the county made with the oil company lawsuit. That the one part of Measure Z that was upheld was the ban on fracking, but it said that except in Fort Ord.
Well, maybe it has to do with the fact that it's federal properties, but they had. It was kind of weird on Measure Z in that there are different kind of legal entities within the county, so you had to have kind of parallel language for all the different kinds of legal entities. Land in the county, and Fort Ord had its own kind of section in dealing with that. And for those who don't know, Judge Wills, who heard the case, actually struck down 2/3 of Measure Z. We have the fracking ban intact, but there was a ban on new oil and gas wells that he struck down, and a phase out of wastewater injection that he struck down. And that's going to go to an appellate court either later this year or early next year. It's being appealed.
But it's also true that Fort Ord is BLM land, so that's now open for drilling, according to the last couple months of the Trump administration.
Well, I believe the California's challenging. I think there are challenges to that.
Great.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Juan Martinez. How are you? I'm born and raised here in Gonzales, California. Born in 1952. My dad was born in 1905 in this town, so we go back a long ways. We got people buried in the cemetery here, going back. The stones are at least 1840, so it goes back a long way. So obviously, even way before that. So we're here today because of you guys. You guys have all took interest in this walking idea, right? Well, I'm a big walker. We used to walk up to the hills when we were kids and back up here with the bikes and cruise down, do all the kid stuff you guys does when you're a kid, right? Back when you could, it was safer to do. And sad to see what's going on in this country now, with all the killings and stuff. Especially we just had news this morning as well, That's I don't know if you guys know, but it's 250 mass shootings, according to the news that I heard this morning. Just this year, 250 mass shootings. So that's disgusting, One of the things that we hope to do with this particular project is build up an awareness for our place in our community, for our place with nature. And to do that, it's a spiritual thing, right? So you got to bring the people along, you got to draw them in. Somehow they got to take it personal. You got to do something and say, hey, this is mine, or, anything like that, right? So you can't do that unless they're a part of it, like what you guys are doing. And that's why, Wes is here, great to have it recorded down the road. This is a long-term project, like all of our long-term projects, right? I mean, look at 50th anniversary of Earth Day's coming up, next year, right? So we've all been involved, some of us, for a long, long time. Some of you guys weren't even around then. But, it's been a long struggle, and it's going to continue for the rest of our lives. In that, what we are aware of is the constant change of society in terms of demographics, income, politics, that kind of stuff, right? So we got to go with the flow. Well, our parents did it, our grandparents did it. We had World War I, World War II, we had Korea, we had the Desert Storm, blah, blah, and here we go, Vietnam. So it's all those challenges where the government takes the money from us and they say, we ain't got no money for this, we ain't got no money for that, because we're spending it, investing it in other things, right? So this involvement gets us involved with local stuff, right? And if some of you guys ever seen the movie, not a movie, but guys like Andy, myself, a few others were invited to go to People's Summit in Chicago. And that People's Summit in Chicago summons people from all over the United States. And it was quite interesting. There was thousands of people, at least 5,000 people there. And from that was developed a plan to help push for this Green Deal. that's coming on now that we all see. But that all happened in Chicago a year and a half ago. Well, that conversation is developing to what it is now, so that people are aware that it's about local issues, local concerns, and if everybody does something locally, then it's happening nationwide, right? It's happening nationwide if everybody's doing it locally, right? And that builds consciousness. So it's hard for us to go to another town and say, you know, hey, you guys got to do this, you got to do that, because I can go to your town in Santa Cruz and tell you all the stuff you all need to do there. Same thing over here. Right? So that's just the way it is. You go to somebody else's house. Oh, that picture was mine. I put it over here. Right? Okay. So what's happened here? We see this slough, and it runs all the way through town. Okay. This is a long. It's over a mile and a half from the edge of town on this side to the edge of town on that side. It runs right through the middle. We'll walk down in there and kind of get a feel for the ambiance down in there. But that is the center of town. Physically the center of town. And when you look at the distance from that last step down there to the end of town, and from that step to the end of town, this is the heart of Gonzales. And it sits right in the heart of the salad bowl of the world. And mentioning that, I want to bring to your attention why it's a concern to me personally. I used to have a good time here playing here. It used to flood out, and we used to have, you know, hey, Tom Sawyer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, balloons, I mean, air tubes, anything, right? Floating thing, our parents all mad because we're going to drown, right? So it was all, it was just great. All through here was oak trees and everything was all full of stuff. It was all natural. We used to crawl through here. We used to catch hell all the time. But that's the way we were as kids. Last year, Wes, Mr. McCall here, we came down in here, we filmed some stuff, and I was able to come down and caught one where we had ducklings down in here. There was about 15 ducklings were floating around and down in there, and the mother duck, or duckette, I guess, was doing her thing. So it was great. We want to continue it. We want to nurture it. You guys look at that windmill back over there? We got two of them in town, right? Okay, one of them says Taylor on there. The other one says Go Spartans. That's a football team. Okay, the Spartan one is for Man Packing Company. The other one says Taylor on it, for Taylor, right? One of the biggest food processors in the planet. Okay, now these guys moved into town because 30 years ago in Salinas, everybody kept complaining about saltwater intrusion was coming up the valley, and we got to stop growth. There was anti-growth people. There was Land Watch was around. Folks like that were saying, hey, we got to control the growth. Us Latinos, the political guys were thinking, oh, it's all about controlling Latinos. You don't want Latinos here, man. That's what it is. So that's the way it was. That's 30 years ago. The reality is we have saltwater intrusion, and that affects everybody. It doesn't matter who you are. Income-wise, geographics, nothing. All right. So what's happened, Taylor and these guys decided 30 years ago, they got to move upstream, up to where the water's at, for two reasons. Geographically, everything from down here has to go to Salinas. And it was okay because we had the trains coming all the way to Monterey and taking products like abalone and everything out of Monterey. The fish was coming out of Monterey. Doesn't do that anymore, but back in the day, that's what it used to do. There's railroad tracks going right, and it connects into the main line right here. So the main line's here, and all the produce was happening in Salinas and being shipped out, and we have small packing operations. Well, these guys moved in. Now that we got 5 of them, sucking water out of the Salinas or Gonzales water aquifer. Now that becomes personal, right? That's our water aquifer. For these guys to take their money, to pocket it, and be happy, sucking our water out and paying us whatever nickel and dime our elected officials decided to put in, right? And these guys have been playing with these elected officials. And me being a political person in the political world, I've seen what they've done, and I'm totally disgusted with it. What we got to do is push the buttons anyway, in any which way we can. What I hope to do, and this is about 15 years ago, on this slope, you see that dried up pine over here? The dried tree there? On that slope, the school had a chance to work with the kids and bring in plants and stuff. So they planted a bunch of stuff. They had a project there. And then they turned around about a year and a half later and they called it an environmentally sensitive area and that the kids shouldn't be in there. It's too sensitive to be in there. Okay, so look at the telephone poles. Why the hell are telephone poles doing in a very sensitive area, right? And they go all the way down the slough, all the way down. They took advantage of the fact that they turned everybody away from here, and they put in the poles all the way down. I talked to the city manager, talked to the leadership, and they said they didn't know anything about it. They don't have to have a permit to do that because it's their right of way. They don't have to have a permit, and they didn't know about it. I came in here and I saw 15 trucks putting in pipes and they upgraded these poles, and they didn't know anything about it. So it's a lie, blatant lie. I asked the city manager. I want to talk to the city council. The city council says there's a policy. Oh, you got to go to the city manager. He'll tell all the city council. City council will call me back, and I can get on the phone, talk to him, set up an appointment, have lunch, whatever, to talk to my representatives. No one's given me a call. It's been over a month. So I got to go back to city council and just point the finger out, right? So which is what I'm going to do and have it on record. What we want to do is turn around and have the community involved for the next election, because this is all about building what we call politically coattail, political wave nationally. So if you start raising the issue in the consciousness now, the electorate, the voters, will get a heads up on it, and they got to do something. But that gives the activists time to organize a base. They go door to door, get petitions, do something to make this happen. Now I know all that water coming out of there. When I sat down and talked to those guys, these 5 companies put in money for a water line, and I saw this about maybe 10 years ago. That pipe's about this big. This big, huge pipe, runs from Gonzales, from those windmills there, all the way to the river. They just dug a big old giant hole and they buried it, and then the fields are right over the top, and they're growing crops on top of it. That's what they did. Okay, that's about 10 years ago. In planning for this, but they had to purchase the land, they had to rezone, they had to do all that, get the right people on the city council. It takes a while. They did that. The next steps, right? And then we see what they're doing. The telephone poles, biting at it a little at a time. Meanwhile, everybody's asleep, letting it happen. But if we start putting this project together and the kids can see the value of coming down here and playing, having a good time, we can come down here and have a picnic around here with our families. Right now, you go to a park, it's packed full of people. So, you know, what if we had a walkway going from one side of the creek all the way down, make a U-turn, come back? You're walking 2.5 miles. Down and back. That's a good little walk. Aside from that, you're growing plants, nurturing the place, watching the ducklings, whatever. Now, that water. I asked them, hey, so what's happening with that, with the excess water? What do you guys do? We're dumping it in the river. You guys can do that? Yeah, we purify it, we clean it, we process it. Really, how many times can you clean water? Right? You run into contaminated produce to wash off the bugs or dirt and contaminants. You process the water, purify it, and then you run it back again. So it's clean enough to do that. Really? How many times can you do that? They didn't have an answer. How long have they been doing that now? They know what the answer is. They just didn't want to tell me. Okay, second, or next step from there. What do you do with it when it gets to a point where you can't process it anymore? Goes to Salinas River. Oh, so you dump it in Salinas River. And I said it in such a way that they got kind of pushed back on it, right? Oh, no, Mr. Martinez. It's safe water. We had the fish and game. Everybody took a look at it. The water quality coming at the other end was safe enough for the fish and the birds and what have you. And it's going to go all the way to where? Sanctuary. Sanctuary. That's a key word. It's all the way to sanctuary. Now, if it's good enough to do that, why can't we just run it across town or a couple of blocks away, fill it up in here? 5 companies dumping water in here constantly, right? It'll fill this place with water. Plus, all of our runoff, the roof, it all goes that way. When geographically, nature's way, it was coming in here from both sides of town. It always goes towards the lowest point. That's the nature of water. It follows the path of least resistance. It's right there. But they forced it to go that way, to go to Salinas River. Why? Because they wanted to dry this place up because it was too dangerous for us kids to come and play. Aside from that, it was also flooding out the streets. There's 5 streets across the Salu. All 5 of them will flood out. So you can actually use the road, and then the water's there as a launching thing, right? You got pavement, get on there, you just launch off. And everybody was doing that, right? We didn't have kayaks and that kind of thing, but you know, we get some tires tying together. We saw the book, you know, we read it. We saw the pictures if you couldn't read, you know, it's all there. So we did that. And we had a heck of a good time. Now that the tragedy is that we don't have enough water in the planet, we all know that. So what are we going to do with the water we have? Let's make the most of it, right? So the birds need to eat. The frogs, the turtles, the ducklings need a place to play and have a life. We're chasing them out. What's happened on that end of the Salu, they're starting to backfill it, bring in dirt. I don't know from where, but if it's too sensitive to have the kids come and beautify it, then why are we dumping dirt out here? Where's that dirt coming from? All those questions I asked the city council, no, there's no reply. Hey, Mary? There's no reply, so that's what we're pushing. And when you guys told me you guys are doing this, I said, hey, right on. Who got all? Oh, we heard you say this and that at some meeting, and I said, oh man, great. I wish I could go. I've been going through some challenges physically myself. I had cancer, and I'm surviving from that. I'm just going through some BS right now with some radiation. You guys ever have a sunburn? Oh man, try a sunburn 31 days in a row, a total of 31 times, and it gets deep inside. And that's the hurt I'm going through. So having you guys around stimulating me helps me forget about the pain. So I'm talking my way through it. So that's what we're doing here. So it was great to get that motivation to be here. And I know one thing about this radiation thing. And a woman told me this. So you women don't take it personal. Okay, a woman told me this. Oh, well, come on, get over here. You're a macho man. You know, you're a hiker. You do all this stuff. Besides, it's like a woman when she has her period. And I couldn't figure it out because I never had a period. Like, when she has her period, yeah, when you're young, you have your period, you don't know. You're scared. Everything hurts. Oh man, cramps, everything. You get older, the older woman says, don't worry about it. 2 weeks it'll be over. This is what this is about. I know the pain and the BS I gotta go through, but I also know it's gonna be over because it heals, right? Hopefully. So that's the approach I'm taking to it. So every time we have to go through suffering and something, it's like giving birth to something, right? It's not always pleasant, but the outcome you hope is the best, and that's what we're hoping for here, is be able to make this thing happen so that we can plant stuff. There's guys encroaching on it. These people here, they're not going to wait for somebody to allow them to use it. They're just going to access the saloon. They use it themselves. I've walked through it, and I've seen about 10, 15 places. They got crops at the bottom. Some people has a little garden where they got squash and potatoes and stuff in there. They just run the hose from the yard, put it in there. The soil is great for that because it's been fermenting there for a long time. So, and all the way down, and I've talked to different friends. The only problem that I see that's the challenge, mosquitoes. So you guys are from Watsonville, Santa Cruz, all those places where there's that great water shed out there. You all know about mosquitoes. That's the challenge, mosquitoes. And I tell it, what is that a challenge? What do you mean that's a challenge? Well, that's what some of the people are saying. No, we don't want the mosquitoes. If you've ever been to a desert, and if you go to a desert, you go to a golf course. Mosquitoes are out there all the time. It's the middle of a desert. There's no lake, there's no river, there's no ponds. And at night, the night lights are on, mosquitoes, millions of them flying around in the desert. Okay? Why? Because they live in the grass. Every time the sprinklers go on, the grass is moist, stays moist. Well, those mosquitoes live off of that. Schools all the way through have lawns, and they're watering them all the time. So where's the logic in that? Because you can offset these arguments, right? You should have to have somebody that's going to be consistent enough to push the issue and make it so real that the voters say, okay, Andy, if you don't want to believe me, fine. We're going to run Mary against you, and that's it. We're not going to waste our time with you no more. I'd rather waste my time instead of arguing with you. Talk to 10 people who are going to vote against you. End of story.
First of all, thank you.
Can you introduce yourself?
I'm Lori.
Lori.
I'm the one we've talked to.
Yeah, Lori, great.
Yeah. So I just want to thank you again for coming out to talk with us. And it's really amazing how many of the points that we've been focusing on, you've already talked on. You know, one is certainly we've been focusing on water as a common thing that we all want to have access to. We've also been talking about oil and energy and the problem of using oil for energy as and as opposed to, you know, windmill or solar or, you know, other things, and sort of shifting from that, and also the way that oil industries are, you know, connected to the Salinas River Valley in a polluting way. And then we're also talking about food and the way that pesticides and big agriculture is, you know, enclosing our food sources and polluting our other resources along the way. These are all sort of quick, shortcut notes. But what I most hear in what I most hear in what you're saying today is wanting to, which is another thing we've been talking about, wanting to have control of your local resources, like wanting to have community say in what's happening and not these big companies that are coming in. And I feel like that's the dominant thing in a lot of what you're talking about, and it's really exciting to hear it spoken in really specific ways. And I was the one who heard you speak at the meeting for Protect Monterey County and saying you wanted to make a river walk. And now I realize, was it the slough you wanted to make the river walk? You wanted to make the whole Salinas. That's what I thought.
But I also realized that every town in the valley has a potential water project, because every town in the valley, it's along the Salinas River. Yeah. If you take Soledad, if you looked at the video on Soledad, the city of Soledad, maybe about from here to those purple and white buildings there. And there's a shopping center, and then there's a river. That's how close Soledad is to the river. And it's a dump. But if we got a group like this with a newspaper, and it goes weekly in the South County paper, and we take on projects throughout the week or throughout the year, and we designate, but our job would be to go out and recruit local people. So we get to the high schools, we get to the college-bound students on the bus, and every student from South County gets a bus to Hartnell. They're on the bus, they're sitting there. Hey, you got it for a half hour, so you could get on the bus in King City and just lecture them all the way down. Get on the bus, go back, catch the next crew, and I've done this with Measure Z. And you talk to them all the way back. And they're all eager, and they're all asking questions, because, hey, they're all just doing that because they got nothing better to do, right? But if you start talking to them about it, and you start greeting all the students coming in, you realize, wow, how many buses could do that? How many volunteers we got? We could hit all these buses. I found that one out through Dolores Huerta when we did Antonia Villaraigosa election in LA. That's what we did with the unions. Got all the union members on buses. Everybody on buses going to work everywhere. And we were just talking up, you know, Antonia Villaraigosa, right? So it was him or the other guy, right? So, you know, that's the choices. And that's kind of like that situation all over the place. And we wish we had better. But to do that, it's up to the next generation. Your generation, by the way. Yeah, it is. Because our generation already knows the problem. And we fought this battle. And we keep fighting this battle. They got the money, we got the people. Now we just got to organize them.
Juan, are you talking about, this is recreational, or are you talking about fish in there? Are you talking about this being, you know, it's a go-to recreational place for people to spend their off hours, right? So are you talking about fish and kids being able to get into the water and move around and
that's a whole lot of good questions. Probably not, because of potential contaminants.
Gotcha.
What runs off the roofs in people's backyards into the slough, we have no control of, right?
Yeah.
So there could be an issue. Stay out of the water. We have a swimming pool. Right?
Okay.
So
Good.
kind of over swimming pool.
Yeah.
Want to play in the water? Play in there. That's one. The other for the birds and fowl and like that. That's all important that we have a natural environment for them. For us, the city of Gonzales, we are the fish. We depend on this water.
Yeah.
We need to have that water because it's getting sucked out and being sent to the sanctuary. We want to send back, percolate back down so it rejuvenates our water aquifer. We have to be rejuvenating our water aquifer. If we could dump it in here and it percolates down, we're rejuvenating our water aquifer. Every town's going to have that challenge. Every town. Look at Castroville right now. It's surrounded by water. Castroville's surrounded by water. There's a number of projects along Castroville that we looked at. Beautiful possibility between Castroville and the railroad tracks and the high school. Those guys that know that area there. There's a nice swamp like this, 5 times that large. Beautiful.
There's a movement in Parks and Recreation. They've done some research that says if there's open spaces, that there's a quota of how many open parks there should be per population. And the research says that if there's open recreational places, there's less crime, there's less poverty. There's creating places like we're doing now in Salinas over by Natividad. We're opening up the LSL Parks and Rec. We're creating a whole park system, you know, with there's a skate park there now. They're building the soccer fields, but they're saying that this is not just a recommendation, it's starting to be a requirement for communities to have open space.
I'm glad you brought that up. That project was started with block grant money in 1976.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and it was targeted to have Carr Lake as a lake.
Yeah.
Right, but sadly the owners were Japanese who had much more land, but were incarcerated during World War II, and a lot of their land was taken away. The war was over. Some of the land was given back, and it wasn't the best land. They just gave it to them. Carr Lake is part of that land they gave back to them.
Okay.
Who's the owners? Japanese. We're going to take their land away again for the public good? I mean, how many times you do that to a person?
Yeah,
right?
really.
You can't. So we had to wait for them to pass on. We waited 50-something years, okay? These guys, longevity, man, I'm telling you. But that's how long it's waited. That's why the discussion is up now, because of that. Because we had to wait. So this is an old story, and that money for the lakes and the ponds along that creek there was started back with that block grant money in the 70s. But that's how long you got to think back. Right here, all this was in the general plan that it had to be developed into recreational area and a water resource in the 60s. In 1963, I got a book, it's a hard copy, General Plan of Gonzales. Before they built some of this stuff around here, they had to fix this. And when they kept building, then the next project, and oh yeah, we're going to do that part over there. Then the next one, and they just kept building. Now they're on the other side of the highway, and they still haven't touched it. The only fixing they've done is bury it and put in telephone poles and keep people off of it. What the heck's that about? So when I was asked by Lori, hey, come on, let's come on, join us over here, and I had to kind of find a way out of it, right? And I said, well, if you're all going to be down here, I'm going to take advantage of you guys and the fact that you all care, and take advantage of you guys and bring you here to a site, so I can talk to you about how we could be doing stuff like this in every town, and go in and agitate the local people, the local youth, as a school project, science project, college project, a city maintenance project, a recreation commission, advisory group project, and I used to do those youth programs and stuff way back in the 70s, so I didn't know about that stuff. But you can, there's access there. When Trump gets knocked off on the election,
God willing, and the devil don't care.
when he's removed as president, there's going to be an effort to invest all this money locally in projects to bring the economy back.
Good.
Not that they care about the roads and stuff, but they do want your taxes. They got to put you to work to get your taxes, so that's what they're going to do. Stop the bombing, put money in your pocket. Now we're going to squeeze that out of you, put it back, and get you to work doing community projects. What are those community projects? Roads, bridges?
Parks.
And if projects are ready on paper, with plans and community support, you're the top of the line, because they want to prove that this stuff works. They're not going to wait, oh, good idea, but it's going to take about 5 years for you to figure out and get it all going.
Do you, well, a couple questions, and if anybody else has questions or things you want to ask Juan or add to the conversation, I'll just give them all to you in mine at once. Do you think that that connects to Green New Deal? there's this youth climate strike that's happening in September, and I wonder if any youth involved in Gonzales are going to be involved in that, and if you know of anybody we might connect to, because we're organizing, the youth are organizing their own business in the Santa Cruz region, but as adults, older people, we're trying to support them, and we'd be happy to make any links that we could if that made any sense. And then the third question is, do you have any sense if your cancer is connected to environmental causes?
Okay, I'll do it backwards. The cancer one, yes, I do believe it has to do with my environment. Because I tried to stay healthy all I could, right, for as long as I could, and I still got sick, right? So how does that happen, right? Then you look around and see everybody's getting sick with cancer. So it has to be part of the environment that does it. And on the second one, you asked about how to connect resource base. If we can commit to looking at class schedules for high school, colleges in the geographic area you want to target, find out who the teachers are, call that school and say, can you make a presentation to that class? Mrs. Smith, I see you're on schedule here, you're going to be the science teacher. We're working on this community project. We hope to get it financed when this happens and money comes from the feds. That's the nature of the level you want to bring it to, so that that teacher can see the value of having a student involved at the local level and how that translates politically. And if you could do that translation where their interest translates into something more, then it's a double, triple whammy if you can set that up. So you participate in voter registration. You don't have to be 18 to participate. I had 10-year-olds participate in voter registration. Just got to get out there. And like what you guys are doing, this is great. Man, I wish I was with you guys. Man, there's water out there right now. I probably have a couple of balloon things or tires to try it out, see how far we go. Inner tubes, yeah, you hit the berm or the sand, just drag it over to the next thing, just keep going. That's the way we used to do it. And we used to have a good time. We used to go for miles. And then our dads would go pick us up.
That's great.
Yeah, pick us up on the trucks, bring us all back. You know, like they do in those raft things they do in the big rivers, like that, but it was all low key, homey kind of stuff.
These power poles running through here, is this PG&E?
Good question. No, it's not. These guys are private. They came in primarily for industry. If you follow the line, it goes to the winery. From the winery down the saloon, and then cuts across over to those the packing operations there.
Yeah.
It all flows. Yeah, it feeds off of it.
So they're just private lines.
I think so. That they weren't PG&E trucks that were here. They were contracted.
Is that a cross? Is that a connection right there? Is that another?
Actually, that's a little part of the sinking of the ground because the water used to run through there, and I'm not sure where the property line would be at there, but they obviously own part of the hole. That hole is theirs. Yeah, and some people have actually started to fill that up. Fill not that one, but other ones. That you know rivers are. You get a low area, and they're filling those up. And I saw that, and I go, man, you don't know what they're putting in there and what's going to end up back down in here, water aquifer, all those issues, right? The fact that we got tunnels like that, you see that tunnel back down in there? Okay, that thing used to flood over the top of that. That's how much water, and on the road, so that's how much water would run that way. And we used to float around in that thing. I would think if we get some river rock, make it real nice, make it look like a cave, make it a project where guys can beautify that so it doesn't look like a cement structure. It looks more like a cave, more natural. You could do waterfalls all around the place. You could pump the water back up and have it circulate down. How do you get mosquitoes from fermenting in one place? Well, they tried bats. Believe it or not, the city of Gonzales tried bats. The bats flew away. So bats do. Okay. They gotta come back, right? They gotta come back. So when they come back, it's gotta be food. But if there's no water or whatever, they're gone, right? So they're heading out somewhere else. So they tried this stuff already. And what I recommend, learning a lot from what we all did with Monterey Bay Community Power and solar and all that kind of stuff, we could put put solar panels all over this place. Got a lot of sun down here. We could put little power motors in the water that just keep pushing the water, pushing it, pushing it, pushing it, pushing it all the way around, all the way around. Just keep pushing the water. Solar power.
And so just to clarify, were you, when you were a kid, this slough had water in it all year round?
Pretty much all year, because there was less sucking of the water from the water aquifers. Which the water aquifers go down, then the surface water starts to follow that, right? It fills the void and it's gone. And that's the problem here. But if you dig, you'll find water. Oh yeah. Yeah, and we can dig in there to do that. Yeah. And I would like to see a trail going across. And, well, it's too political, too sensitive. No, you can't do that. Really? So how come these guys get tracked? I mean, how did they do that? With a helicopter? They put a truck in there? What'd they do, right? It had to be poles brought in by a truck when it was dry.
Digging.
Money.
Yeah.
So was this a natural waterway that, or was how much of it has been?
All of this is natural. Yeah. The water from here goes this way. Up here it goes this way. Yeah, so it's natural.
Does it eventually converge on the river? Does it empty into the river at all?
This empties into the river.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, glad you mentioned that, Andy. Back in my dad's day, he reminded me of this, or told me about it. Didn't remind me, just told me about it back in the day. But we had a canal coming from the Salinas River into Gonzales, so that this would have water in it, so that the dairy guys would have water that they could suck out of, and their wells were only 90 feet deep. It wasn't that deep back in the day. They'd have water, right? Because this thing was full, and it percolated into the ground, and then everybody would have water. But the water kept coming from Salinas River. It filled up in here, run all the way down. It goes back on the north side of Gonzales, about a mile past outside of Gonzales, mile and a half. It goes under the highway. Okay, it goes under the highway and heads towards the river. So it goes right through here and then back down. You guys ever been to San Antonio, Texas? Riverwalk?
Yes.
Y'all know how that works? Off the San Juan River, they got gates. Floods into the canal, the Riverwalk. Floods into that canal. And they pump it back into the river at the other end. And it just keeps doing that. That's how they're doing the Riverwalk in San Antonio. Yeah. And it's a beautiful project. I mean, here, yeah, I would like to have a project here and have a big barbecue and just force the city and invite them here. Force the city to come, hey, have a hot dog. Check it out. Yeah. Or a veggie snack or something, right? For all you Santa Cruzers. Hey, we're blood and juice and stuff. Sausage. That's the way we are, I guess.
Stay connected. That's the idea. Yeah. I think. Yeah. I just have to say that I know that I promised people they'd get home around 2, and we have a ways to get back to Santa Cruz. But I just want to say, if anyone else has anything else you want to add or ask.
Well, I like to forage. We're surrounded here by perennial arugula. All these plants are the perennial arugula, which is much better than the annual one. And that Lavatera plant there, I mentioned it before. It's native to the Channel Islands off of Santa Barbara. You've seen the hummingbirds on it, but actually the little fruits of that plant, when they're still green, are an edible. Little taste like peas, and they're good to eat. The flowers are edible also. The leaves are a little fuzzy, but they're edible too.
You're talking about the plant with the pink flowers? Is that what you're talking about? Wow.
That one is. That's a different malva. That's a little purple flower. But this is the perennial. All this stuff around here is all this perennial arugula.
So what's the plant with the pink flowers? What's
It's called Lavatera surgentiflora. It was brought over from the Channel Islands off of Santa Barbara, 100 years ago. And people put it in their gardens.
Hey, you guys, I do want to. I know that Lori mentioned the time, so let me just say, I have talked to Bill Monning about it. Loves the idea because he's into water, right? We all know that. So Bill loves the idea. John Laird, last year or the year before, I spoke to him about it. He says, give me a project. Give me something in writing because we got money for 2 more projects. So yeah, write a proposal, submit it and all that in a short amount of time, not knowing. I said, no, I'll tell you what we do. We'll videotape it. So we videotaped it and we sent it to them. Said, hey, this is our project. You put that in paper and send us the money. Right? They got staff. If they want to get rid of money, you guys do it. We'll spend the money, you know, and we'll invest it here. So he loved the idea, didn't give us no money. But I understand he's going to run for possibly Bill C, right? Okay, when that happens, we got that support. We got to deal with Ana. Ana is not a good legislator when it comes to environmental causes. Not a good one at all. Okay, so that's where our challenge is at. We could take her out real fast if we wanted to, but then who do you get, right? So that's our problem with Ana. And that's what they do with Simon, that's what they did with Fernando, and all these Latinos that we've had on that board of supervisors. They get them because they're wishy-washy, and they want that job, they want that ego, they want that money, okay? So they stay there and they do whatever the administration says is the right thing to do. So these guys, without exploring what is another option that could be just as right, if not better, than what's being offered, they don't do that. Oh, that's the right way to do it. Okay, whatever you say. They don't argue it. They just go along.
Los benditos.
So it was advised to turn around and start working on the projects now. Get something in place in paper, video, documentaries, community-based, because when the money hits the table, which is going to happen in the next year or two, maybe 3, we're set to go. But these kind of projects, like it's going to take a while to go door to door and get everybody to sign off and say, hey, I live in Gonzales. I'm concerned about the water aquifer. Real simple petition, right? Are you concerned about it? How many gallons are being spent into the Salinas River? What can we do to rejuvenate our water aquifer? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, easy, next, right? That's easy to do. Then you use that as a role model to show the rest of the communities what can happen. So then the Rotaries, Lions, and the Kiwanis and all these other clubs who are local clubs with local people in these small towns, hey, they care about the local stuff. You know, on the upper levels, you know, they're like, yeah, you know, that's too liberal, oh, that's too conservative. Yeah, I just care about my own stuff. Okay, then get them on that. But as organizers, as leaders in the community, you always have to look for how do I hook this person in? You know, what can I do? Think about it. There's always a way, but you got to be persistent. And that's the one thing about this thing is persistence. And you all well know about the projects we do with pesticides. Pesticide stuff is just persistence. Even though we know we're right and we're getting beat up, hey, do it because it's the right thing to do. We got no choice. You can't just be hiding all the time. It's not right. It creates the problems we have now, worldwide. And we let these guys take over. I don't want to get involved. I don't want to get dirty.
Thank you so much. Really.
My pleasure, guys. Come on, let's do this one. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Sí se puede.
Can I say one thing? We have an email list for the Connect the Dots Riverwalk project. If you're not on it and you want to be, give me your email because I'm the one that adds people to the list. So we haven't used it much, but we could use it a lot more for actual discussion and stuff.
And names I already have too.
Okay, you have some new ones?
I do want to say we also have 3 churches along the creek and all the schools. So they all have interest in it. And the 3 churches where our communities go. So we've been able to use the pulpit to make presentations. We did it with Measure Z. No, we did it with Monterey Bay Community Power because the bishop was behind it. The bishop called everybody and says, hey, let these guys in. So now we could try to do the same thing and get access to the place, and they could get signatures and stuff outside the church. So when people come out, they already heard you. They already know what that paper's about. They're just coming out to sign it.
Yeah.
That's all. Yeah. So it's that simple. You do that in every town, you're going to have thousands of signatures in no time. And then you present them and just say, hey, we want one project that does the entire valley. And if you all know, it's 110 miles from the mouth of the river, or from the Pajaro River, all the way down the county line. So it's about 100 miles, I would think, from the mouth of the river. From the mouth all the way down to the county line, about 100 miles. I sent this stuff to Bill mining. He sent it to Gary Carnes and some of his buddies there in the peninsula. Got feedback. Hey Juan, did you know that there's a Salinas River walk in San Luis Obispo County? I start Googling it. They have a 30-mile river walk, exactly what you guys are doing now. 30-mile long. It just started a couple of years ago in concept, and it just started. It was 30 miles long on the Salinas River in San Luis Obispo County. That's Bill Manning's county.
Awesome.
Bill Manning can hook us up with those resources, right? How-to people that did that work. Why? So we can connect this one to it. Not I mean the Salu, I mean our river. Now you have it from Monterey Bay all the way up to Santa Margarita Lake, which is the source of the Salinas River.
So we should write to our supervisors. We should email our supervisors, email Bill Manning.
Down the road, that's what we'll do. Locally, we had to do the local thing first, and that's my responsibility. I just took advantage of the fact you guys are all going to be here, and you're not going to throw tomatoes at me by talking too much environmental stuff, right? So, and that's great. Yeah, but one of these days we could kick it off by just doing a weed eating or cleaning here and make it a public issue where we come in, clean this place out, bring in barbecue pits, and let everybody know we're here.
Yeah.
Just let them know we're here. It's going to be in the paper, it'll be in the news. We record it, put it out ourselves. This is what we're doing. You can do that city by city by city by city. Remember, Salinas Valley feeds the world. You guys are helping feed the world and feed the workers that feed the world. And we need the water. Right now the bills are $200 a month for these farm workers that are getting $10, $12 an hour. $200 a month for water bills. Why? That's why they're sucking that out. And they're billing us high so that we don't use so much water. So that there's more water for them. Instead of the other way around.
Yep.
All right, Juan, we're going to have to leave, but thank you so much again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys.
For those of you who are interested, we'll have another walk in early September and send out info on where, I think probably it'll be further south down the river, so you're going to have to be willing to commit a little bit of time.